All right, well, we are going to get started here. So first of all, everyone, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Dan Sullivan. I'm going to be the moderator for today. Thank you to Charity and Lizzie and Zinnia for having me, and thank you to our panelists for being here. Get into that in a second. So for those that are joining us, please introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know where you're joining from. And then secondly, if you have any questions while our panelists are talking, please use the Q&A functionality at the bottom of the Zoom. And if you see a question that you like, give it a little thumbs up. It'll push those to the top. It'll allow us to prioritize the questions that are a bit more pressing for our panelists. So without further ado, again, thanks for being here. We're going to have a great conversation. So I'm going to hand the mic off to Lizzie from Cultural Innovations, who will talk a little bit about today.
Hello, everyone. Well, so we're reopening. This is the third of our webinars. So we're looking at different aspects of reopening. And today we're looking at financial sustainability. What about the earned income that we all rely on, and how's that being affected by the situation? And what new sources of revenue are there out there? So we have a panel of agile experts who are going to give us an insight on both sides of the Atlantic as to what's going on, and new models maybe for shops, cafes, licensing, e-commerce, virtual programming, and even micro weddings. Things have to be micro now with social distancing. So we have Sarah Elliott, who's the Executive Director of Liberty Hall in Kentucky. And Claire Tomlinson, who's Head of Enterprise at the Henry Moore Foundation. And both those organizations actually are strangely similar. So it'd be interesting to see how that pans out as you speak about your experiences. And then finally, we have Richard Sweet, who is the Director of Enterprise from the Museum of London, which is in an interesting situation because there's a big new project that also has to take into account what the future is for museums. So I shall now hand over to Charity to introduce herself and how we're doing.
Thanks, Lizzie. I'm forever grateful that Lizzie reached out and we could get this series started. It's something that we're hearing a lot in the Midwest, an interest in knowing what others are doing. But we felt like a unique twist would be to have a conversation happen, across the pond, that it's an international panel, not just in the US. So we can all learn from each other. As Dan and Lizzie have already mentioned, I'm Charity Katz, the Executive Director for the Association of Midwest Museums. We're super grateful that our colleagues in the Southeast, Zinnia, who you'll get to meet here in a moment, and then Lizzie and Dan from Cuseum have been able to help us pull this series together. Dan, thanks so much for moderating. You're great. I hope everybody enjoys the conversation today. With that, I'll let Zinnia give a few remarks and welcome our panelists.
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Zinnia Willits. I am the new-ish, 2 months new, Executive Director for the Southeastern Museums Conference. And I have been so thankful to partner with Cuseum and Midwest Association of Museums and Cultural Innovations on these webinars. And I'm thrilled to see so many from the Southeast who are here today. And just how this works, Sarah Elliott, thank you for responding to my call. When we began talking about a topic for this one and revenue, I put out a message to a group chat I'm on and said, hey, does anybody know someone who's open and already doing rentals? And Deb Van Horn, who I see on the chat here, said, oh, my friend Sarah Elliott in Kentucky. And that's literally how this works. So I am so thankful to everyone who is speaking. I know it's an additional amount of work on top of everything else that you're doing. And thank you on behalf of all of us for your time today. So that's it for me.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you for being here again. And without further ado, so we're going to go into about a 5-minute kind of round robin presentation for our different panelists. Are going to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about kind of, some examples of revenue strategies that they've been exploring, how it's been going with their reopening process, and really just talk a little bit about how the pandemic has affected their different business areas and whatnot. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah Elliott, who's going to talk a little bit about Liberty Hall Historic Site.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Liberty Hall is a small site in Frankfort, Kentucky. Frankfort's the capital. It's about 30,000 people on a good day. We have a lot of state workers, so population goes up. But the site, just very briefly, historically was the home of one of Kentucky's first, one of the early political families. So we're owned by the National Society of the Colonial Dames of America in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So we're a privately owned facility. Our earned income over the years, like everybody else, it was rentals, which in our case was both the rentals of the grounds as well as apartment rental. We have 2 apartments on the property, so we get income from that. Programs, we have a small shop, so basically the same kinds of income as everyone else. Our earned income is really very small. It's about 10% of our budget. We have income from our investments, and we have a strong fundraising donation aspect of our programming. We are open now, but it's very limited. The spaces are small, so we only have about 6 people per tour. Everybody has to wear a mask. It's actually mandated now in Kentucky that everybody wear a mask, and we do social distancing. Before we got into, we made all these plans of virtual programming that we wanted to do to get financially started again. But what we did was we sent out a survey to our mailing list to see what people, these are people who have been to the site before, and we wanted to know what their comfort level was. And interestingly, about 50% said they were somewhat likely to come for an in-person indoor tour, and about 50% said they were comfortable coming to an outdoor in-person program or tour. So we're probably going, since we're already doing tours of the house, we'll probably switch to doing some garden tours or demonstrations or something like that. One of the things we're really pushing is rentals of the garden. We have about 4 acres of landscaped gardens and grounds. As Lizzie mentioned, we're focusing on what they're calling the micro wedding. We can only, in Kentucky, can only have groups of 50 or less, social distancing, wearing masks. Fortunately, our gardens are large enough that we could do that. One aspect of our rentals that we have is that we have a liquor license. People, because of the way our license is set up, wedding receptions cannot bring their own alcohol. They have to buy it from us. So that is a source of income for us, is to sell them liquor. We're also looking at other, like baby showers or engagement parties, or maybe even book clubs. We haven't quite figured out the pricing on those because they're using the same grounds as the wedding. So we're having to work on that. We are looking at the cost effectiveness of going to an online shop. It may be, really worth it because we're not, the shop is closed right now. We also did an online auction. We had to cancel our big fundraiser in April, and we do a live and silent auction. So we had all these wonderful things that people had donated, and we didn't want to, have to give them back. So we did a live or online auction, which worked out pretty well. So we may think about doing something like that later as well. The one thing I really wanted to talk about was our virtual plant sale. And you can see this is part of the catalog. We borrowed the idea from one of our sister historic house museums, Farmington Historic Site in Louisville. Both of us have a long tradition of having plant sales in the spring. And Farmington had done a pre-order several years ago, and it worked out really well. So they thought, well, because of COVID, we'll do that again. And it was very profitable for them. So we borrowed the idea. And what we did was we created this online catalog, put it up on our website, posted it on social media, and sent out an email blast. All of these plants are grown in our garden. So that's the cachet. People love to say that their begonia or their aster came from Liberty Hall. So that's a big selling point for us. What we did was people called us and placed their orders. Then we told the gardeners how many plants we needed. The day of pickup, people pulled up in front of the house. They told a volunteer their name. The volunteer picked up the prepackaged plants, put it in their trunk, and away they went. So it was all done very safely. People were wearing masks, and we did really well. We actually made almost $200 more than we budgeted. It's not a big income for us, but it's a good one. Plus, it's a good what do I want to say? Way of advertising the site. And the other interesting thing is, because of the online sales, we got a lot of people that never came to have never been to the site and have never purchased plants before. So we did get some new people. We have meetings every week trying to come up with new ideas. We look at everybody else's websites to see what other folks are doing. Currently, our idea is whether or not it would be professional for us to monetize the gray lady, our ghost. Is that something we really want to go down that path? I'm interested in hearing what other people are doing. I don't think the board would be really supportive of that idea, but anyway, we're getting kind of desperate for earned income. So we'll see what happens. But I'll be glad to answer questions later if anybody has any.
It's definitely been an interesting time as far as rethinking business models or sources of revenue. And I think a lot of organizations have been trying to kind of pull a rabbit out of the hat to figure out some new or some creative ways that they can drive more revenue for the organization. So I'm going to hand it over to Claire. So Claire, if you can talk a little bit about kind of how the pandemic has affected your revenue, your business areas, and what you're doing to revive them. And in addition to that, what percentage of your annual budget is coming from, or how reliant are you on self-generated revenue like admissions, rentals, traveling, exhibitions? If you can talk a little bit about that and introduce yourself, we'd love to hear it.
Hello. Yes, thank you, Dan. I'm going to jump in and answer that question straight away. So the revenue that our income streams that I'm responsible for in the commercial side of the Henry Moore Foundation contributes about 1/5 of our annual running costs for the foundation. And the rest, a lot of it comes from our investments, similar to Sarah. The Henry Moore Foundation was set up in the 70s by Henry Moore himself, and now exists to really build on his legacy and take that forward, especially promoting sculpture in public and around the world. We are a grant-giving organization to aid that, and we're split across 2 sites. The one that you can see on the slide is our Henry Moore Studios and Gardens in Adam, sorry, there's something in the way there. It's a tiny hamlet in East Hertfordshire, which is about an hour's drive out of London. So it's quite a unique site, and it's where Mr. Moore lived for most of his life after he was moved out of London during the war. And his house is there. And we also have a 72-acre estate, which has a lot of his sculptures that he sited there. So we are, there's a large reclining figure. So it's a really beautiful site. My role is to look after all of our commercial activities. So I cover visitor services, and together with our marketing team, we're responsible for admissions. I cover retail. We have a small shop. We have an online shop. I'm also responsible for art sales, licensing, venue hire, and any filming or photography that we do on site. We hold weddings. We have a 16th century old barn that holds Moore's tapestries, which is really beautiful, where you can get married. We do private events, we do corporate, and we also have income from rentals. So we have a cafe on site, and Mr. Moore also bought the lease to the pub, which is across the road from where we are. So we look after the pub too, which is quite nice. We opened on the 4th of July, and I'm just going to run you through a couple of measures that we took. So there's the exterior of the barn. So we are predominantly an outdoor venue, which really helped us in terms of our messaging to our public and making people feel like it was a safe place to come and visit. So we limited the numbers, as I know a lot of organisations have done. We at the moment we've got 300 daily, 60 an hour, but we are just about to raise that to 400 a day and 80 per hour after having a couple of weeks of testing our systems. We've seen that everything so far has been working, so we're prepared to start to expand those numbers, especially as we're just about to go into the school holidays here in the UK. So we have one-way systems in place in all of our indoor areas. So here you see the barn. There is a clear way in and a clear way out and a hand sanitizing station. We also have a member of staff there who helps people, reminds people to sanitize their hands. We have invested in a lot of airport barriers and signage. It's not pretty, but it's, and in a way we've had to kind of just accept that because we have a brand new visitor centre and it's a shame to take away some of the aesthetics from it, but safety goes before that at the moment. We have expanded our picnic areas. So we can accommodate more people to sit outside because of the limited space inside. You'll see here we've put screens up. They were actually built, those screens over the desk. It's normally completely open, but we've had them put in place to again, protect our staff, protect our visitors. There is PPE been made available for all of our staff. If a visitor would like a mask, we have them available. We've also upped our staffing levels to help facilitate queue management. And a really key thing for me was making sure that our staff felt comfortable and had adequate training to get their heads around the changes for this season. We have a seasonal staff that come in every year because we're open from April through to November. Things that helped us were our local tourism board came up with I'm COVID secure certificate. So we applied for that. And so we've been able to use that to promote ourselves as a site that has passed a sort of test, so to speak, to prove that we have done all the necessary measures to make people feel safe. So the key thing really for me and my team and our CEO was that we kept our staff feeling safe and we keep our visitors safe, especially because we do have an older demographic at Henry Moore. We also wanted to maintain the best possible visitor experience. This is something we really pride ourselves on. So that's why having those extra staff in place to help people and all the signage that we've put in place is to help with that. Here you can see a bit of a before and after shot of our cafe on one side, pre-COVID, and on the other side, post. So we've made it completely takeaway only this season. And you can also pre-order picnics and afternoon teas. And that really speeds people going through the cafe, nobody's stopping, they're just picking up their food and off they go. And that's working really well so far. So just to touch on how the pandemic's affected our revenue streams in particular. So we lost the admissions and all related visitor spend for 13 weeks. We had to close our online shop because there was nobody available to package and send things out when we had to have no staff on site. And all of our events were postponed or cancelled. And obviously we lost our rental incomes as well. To measures that we've been taking to revive revenue in particular, with admissions and retail, we've had to obviously look at our targets, and this has obviously gone right up to the board. People have really understood the position that we're all in and that we can't be working to the pre-COVID targets. So everything has been readjusted. It's been a little bit of a finger in the air exercise because we didn't know how many people would be wanting to come back or what the appetite would be, but so far, so good. So we've readjusted all our targets. So we're not aiming for something unachievable. We focused on a digital marketing campaign. So we haven't got posters up on railway stations or in London at the Tube because there's nobody there to see them. We've ensured that all the information about reopening and our new systems is really clear on the website. So anybody who's thinking of coming to visit, if they're in any doubt, can really see before they come that it's going to be a safe experience for them. We've taken 15% off our regular ticket price because we don't have a couple of things open, namely Mr. Moore's house because it's very small, And we also haven't been able to open our exhibition that we run this year. That's been mothballed till next season. On retail, we've pared down our offer and taken some things out of the shop to make it a much more sort of streamlined experience for people. They could, with minimal touching. We are looking to widen our online shop. We've come up with a book browsing table with gloves available, and we've done a better display of our prints that we sell in a display cabinet to help promote them. Venue hire has been really interesting. We've not lost any bookings. We've managed to postpone all of them, and I have a venue manager who's been working incredibly hard to keep in touch with all of our hirers to reassure them that as soon as we can get them back in, we will. We've actually got a small wedding taking place this Saturday, which is exciting. So we will have a small wedding, 30 people happening in the barn, which is our first. We haven't got many booked in after that, unfortunately, but it's great that somebody's going with it. And really, in terms of events and venue hire, this year is going to be a tough year. And I think I'm thinking now that I'd like to focus on 2021 and really think about the marketing around that, especially for corporate bookings. For my colleagues who still work in some of the big museums in London, they said the corporate appetite for events at the moment is very low, and that they're really thinking about 2021. That's me.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Claire. And it sounds like, one of the biggest takeaways just from what you're sharing is just the sense of responsiveness or iteration in kind of your approach towards handling these situations where this is what we're doing now, but we're going to adjust that a little bit, keep, again, tweaking the knobs a little bit and making sure that we kind of arrive at the optimal experience for our visitors. So with that, I'd like to hand the mic over to Richard Sweet to talk a little bit about what they are doing over at the Museum of London.
Thank you very much indeed, and greetings to you all. We're going to go from Claire's bucolic countryside to the centre of the City of London. So the first shot you've got here is our museum at London Wall, a brutalist epic of 1976, surrounded by a roundabout, as you can see, and also tons and tons of offices. So we are in the square mile. We are surrounded by lawyers, accountants and traders, as far as I can see. And of course, nobody actually lives in the City of London. In the square mile, there are princely 7,000 inhabitants. But just to give you a picture, we are, like all national museums in the UK, we are free entry. And we've got a site here in the City of London in the financial district. And later on, I'll show you some slides of our other museum over in the other financial district in Canary Wharf. To give you a little bit of a picture of our visitors, we have about 1 million visitors a year across the sites. Around about 50% of them are overseas tourists, so that's the first problem that we have. And of course, virtually everybody comes to our museum by public transport, which is probably another problem. Here you can see the main entrance to the Museum of London, and what we must be one of the few museums in the world that doesn't have an entrance on the ground floor. It actually, you have to get up an escalator and go on the high walks around the Barbican Centre to actually enter. So some logistical problems, but we've been there, as I say, since 1976. It's a well-known London landmark, and it's this sort of brutalist building telling the social history of London from prehistory through to the current day. Our other site over in Canary Wharf is a very different type of building. If we could just move the slide on. We'll get there, hopefully. Yes, there we go. So this is one of the original warehouses built in the Canary Wharf docks area, built in 1802. It's a magnificent Grade 1 listed building. And this is another social history museum, but it tells the story of the development of the dockyard trade and to some extent the development of the Thames from around about the 18th century and onwards. Again, everybody comes here by public transport. This one has a much more local focus, so it's really around boroughs of London that are local, and it has a slightly younger target audience. Across the two museums, if I can just sort of outline the commercial activity, we've got a total income of about £18 million, about £3.5 million, so about 20% of that is self-generated income. A third is retail income, shops in other locations. 10% of income comes from the commission that we take on catering activity. 15% is what I would call slightly odds and sods. It's sort of anything from weddings to the sales of guidebooks. But 40% of it, the largest chunk, and by any measure, the most profitable chunk, is venue hire. And you can see we've got one building here, which is a bit of a landmark and is a beautiful place to have a venue, whether corporate or private. The other one that you've seen over in the City of London is very well placed for basically anything from an office party to a management away day. And so 40% of our income comes from venue hire. So there are certain challenges for us, like virtually everybody in the UK. We closed down in March. We are due to reopen on the 6th of August, and we're very much looking forward to doing so. But some of our, not many, but some museums and galleries in London have already opened. And I'll end in a moment by talking about some of their experience so far. But what we've been doing is, as we prepare for opening, we've been looking at our retail business. We've obviously been very much focused on online trading. We've introduced click and collect so that people can pre-order and collect their product when they actually come in. And we've developed on the website a kind of wish list so that we're effectively encouraging people to expand their average transaction value. We're rather like Claire, we're having to edit our physical shops. They're just not big enough to allow for social distancing as people shop there. And we're going to basically have a more concise offer of bestsellers there. For catering, very much like Claire, it's all about pre-pack, pre-order and takeaway. You can see it with this museum here. We've actually got quite a lot of space outside the museum, so we'll be encouraging people, hopefully, to make use of the fine weather that we're going to enjoy. But venue hire is one of the big challenges. We have got a strong daytime business, and we're adapting our offer to do what we call mixed events. So they'll be smaller. Some people will be physically there. Some people will be either at home or in an office and joining electronically, a bit like this meeting now. And we're trying to adapt our offer to get that one through. We've already had some initial commercial interest in daytime hire. Corporate hire, I'm afraid my experience is very different from Claire's. We've actually got a very strong demand. What we don't know is whether we're going to be able to fulfill it. So in the Docklands Museum you see in front of you, we had an inquiry for a December event for 1,400 people, which I would be delighted to service, but I don't know whether I'm going to be allowed to. So we have this strange thing between the confidence of the customer and the somewhat reluctance of the vendor. One aspect that's been very frustrating while we've been closed has been the ability to monetize content. Almost as soon as every museum shut, everybody chucked content out into the digital world for free. So nobody's charging for a lecture, for a virtual tour, for access to a curator. Everybody's done it for free. And I think that one of the big lessons learned for all of us, for if it, God forbid it happens again, is to actually be a bit more cautious about what content you put outside. I said I'd conclude briefly with what other people's experiences have been. So, people like Tower Bridge or the National Gallery that have actually opened about a week or two ago. A couple of things. What percentage of your normal visitors are we seeing? And the answer at the moment is about 10%. It's really, really low. And I think that part of that is because any survey that we've done of visitors' appetite to visit our type of institution, the first concern they have is nervousness, apprehension about using public transport. And that, I think, is the biggest disincentive. So a lot of people say, I'm interested in coming, I'm going to delay my visit. I am apprehensive about public transport. The second thing is that certainly some of the info from the National Gallery says 84% of their visitors are Londoners. So it's not as if we're actually attracting anybody from the area around London, it's all the core people in London. And of that 84%, 77% are people who visited the gallery in this case in the last year. So you are absolutely hugely appealing to your core supporter base anyway. So the people who are passionate about the gallery or my museum are going to come first, but the issue will be how quickly does everybody else follow on behind? Because 10% visitor base, as we can all work out, is extremely painful in terms of funding. So that's if you like, our experience so far, we're making adaptations to our offer before we open, but we know that we're going to sail into some pretty strong headwinds come August the 6th and onwards. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing, Richard. And I think so many organizations are in the same boat where our expenses are virtually the same, but we're only getting a small percentage of the number of visitors that are coming through the door. And you hit on something that I just want to reiterate is this idea of a shift from a predominantly tourist-driven revenue model to a very local-centric one, where lots of organizations are starting to see, since people aren't traveling necessarily outside of their towns, cities, or states as frequently, there's a much more of an inclination to go and visit the places around. It's this kind of old adage of, well, I can go there anytime, so I literally never go there. So I think that we're likely going to see a bit of a shift in that, and in many organizations we've seen already are. So I want to jump into some of the questions from the audience here. This is a big one, and we hear it all the time, but I want to hear from Sarah, Richard, and Claire. What are you doing for time ticketing? So when we get reopened again, what are the strategies that can be deployed? What systems are you using for time ticketing? Richard, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, it's a hot issue for us. We actually have used a system that a friend of ours in America has given us. I can't remember which institution it was, but they shared with us a model that basically looks at space in galleries. You apply a social distancing measure. The guesstimate then comes to what is your dwell time, and that gives you your maximum capacity. You can then time ticket it, and that's what we're doing it in 15-minute time slots. The worry that we have a bit is certainly the National Gallery have got, bear in mind we're free, so we're asking people just to literally just book a slot with us. You get something like a 20 to 25% no-show rate is what has been experienced so far. So we might do a bit of the airline job where we overbook, expecting people to cancel out as we go. But we've done we've got a responsibility to keep the numbers in that. We also have to track and trace. So we're scanning people in and scanning people out, so that should we be contacted by the health authorities, we know who was in and when they came in and when they left. So we've gone in hard on that particular issue, I have to say.
Definitely a hot topic. Sarah, how about on your side? Are you doing anything for time ticket?
Yes, we have. We've got a new system. It's called Fair Harbor, and all of our guests have to pre-order their tickets, and this has been really wonderful. In addition to purchasing their tickets, there's a little space there where they can actually make a donation. So if somebody's ticket price was $16, they could give us a $4 donation to round it up. So that's been really nice. But that's what we are. We're only doing 2 tours a day right now, and it's a limit of 6. But the online ticketing thing is really worth it, I think, for organizing the tours.
Definitely. And Claire, how about on your side? Are you doing time ticket?
Yeah, we are. We've always had online ticketing available. We use the Art Fund, who support organisations, and they've always been our partner with online ticketing. But we barely ever used it because we're quite a big estate. People don't need to book in advance. They wait and see what the weather's doing, and then they decide they're going to come. So actually, from my point of view, it's great to see how many people are going to come, but they are still waiting till the day before to book just to see what the weather's doing. But we don't need to time them in and out because we are a big estate. We could absorb the whole 300 all at one time, but we're just staggering them in to prevent queues and pinch points.
Definitely. Sarah, a number of folks are asking about the survey that you administered to your mailing list. Are you able to share any of the questions you asked? And we can also make it available most likely after the webinar through Charity and Zinnia and Lizzie. But can you talk a little bit about kind of how you went about creating that survey, maybe some of the questions that you were asking?
Sure. We wanted to, our educator and I worked together on it. We asked some demographics, the age, whether they what the distance from Frankfurt, did they come, did they live in Frankfurt, certain distance away, that sort of thing. We asked if there were children under 10 in their families. We asked them what programs had they participated in before. The one thing that I was very interested in getting feedback was what could we do to make them feel safe to come to the site. And not surprising, wearing a mask was the number one thing, social distancing, and having limited tours or limited number of people at the event. So that was really helpful. Then we asked if they would be interested in in-person, limited in-person activities, outdoor activities, virtual, and would they be interested in virtual programs where they would make something? And actually, it's not surprising because most of the people who surveyed, like 70% that responded, are 65 plus. So they really weren't interested in the handcraft kind of thing that a family might have been. But it's been very fascinating to me. I've been looking at the national surveys, but we really wanted to know what our audience was saying. And I'll be more than glad to share the questions if anybody's interested.
Awesome, thank you. Here's another question. This one's from Amanda Webster. Do any of you have monetary collection boxes on site? And if so, have you adjusted those collection processes to protect your guests and staff? I'm not going to put anyone on the spot, but Sarah, Claire, Richard, any of you doing collection boxes?
Yeah, sorry, beg your pardon, but we introduced cashless ones about a year ago, and it was really interesting as we moved from cash to cashless. The average donation went up very significantly, partly because you're suggesting a reasonable one, but it's much easier. You know, cash transactions 10 years ago in the UK was 60% of all transactions. Last year there was 16%. Currently, nothing. You know, everything is cashless. So we've moved that way anyway, and so it'll just reinforce what's going on. Can I just very quickly pick up on the ticketing point, because I saw a question come in. My marketing team is salivating over free ticketing because we'll get email addresses, we'll get postcodes, we can put it through Mosaic data, we'll find out more about our audience than we've ever known. Admittedly, it'll be smaller numbers, but free museums, we rely on surveys all the time. This will give us hard data about dwell times, hard data about where they're coming from in London to come to the museum. It'll be really useful.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Sarah, you were going to say something about collections on site.
Oh, we do have donation boxes, but we removed them because of COVID. It was just another thing we'd have to take care of, so we just removed them.
For sure. And Claire, how about on your side? Anything you're doing as far as on-site collections, donations?
No, we don't have any because of our ticket price. We haven't ever gone down that road at the moment.
And
Awesome.
I noticed a follow-up question to the cashless donation box that Richard mentioned. How does that work?
It basically, you have a freestanding item, and on top of that, you can put whatever marketing material you choose. So some museums and galleries will say, well, you know, we're collecting for this particular artifact to conserve it or preserve it or keep it in the museum or whatever. Other people have a generic, please support this museum, with a suggested donation of £5 or £10. And then literally you've got to contact this point and you just wave your debit or credit card at it and ping, in it comes. And it's
Magic.
My finance team love it. No
Yeah, and your bank account. Yeah,
exactly. Well, not mine, clearly, but
yeah,
no,
yeah, theirs.
It's the way to go. Charity shops in the UK now have cashless donations, so there's a big swing away from cash. Even buskers and people like that in London use cashless donations because so few people carry cash now.
For sure. And Richard, just one quick follow-up question. What is the name of the ticketing program that you're using?
We use it's Spectrix. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. We've used it forever. It's really a theatre system, so it's great at sort of booking events. It's not great for other aspects, but for this particular purpose, it's ideal. It does everything by time slot, and it's pretty easy to use.
Awesome, thank you. Here's a question from Rebecca Franco. Are any of you continuing to have programming on site, or are you only open to general audiences? Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like now? Anybody at all?
We're open for tours only, but we would like to start doing the outdoor, actually our educators working on an outdoor guided garden tour.
It's nice because it gives, you know, a little bit of space. It's much easier to be distant. Sorry, Richard.
Our hosts normally offer free, effectively, tours of the galleries, and we do external walks and tours. We've had to cancel all of those just because of social distancing. We will put on some small scale, what I would call lectures or symposia, because we have a lecture theatre which is about 300 seats, so we can get, you know, 40 or 50 or 60 in there just about. But yeah, it's very, very difficult, and particularly the other one that's going to affect us is learning. So normally we have very large educational parties that come and visit, and we put on stuff for them. That's not really going to happen this year, I don't think.
Sure. Claire, anything you want to throw in there?
Yeah, likewise, we offer free school visits, and we've had to postpone all of them. We might see where we are at in October, but I don't think there's a big appetite. All of our public programming was cancelled when we reopened. We were just last year started doing life drawing, which was lovely, and we do quite a lot of guided tours, and we actually have a really strong band of volunteers who help with that. And one thing that my team is really keen on doing is keeping our volunteers engaged throughout this, because they're really key to us. And we are thinking about trying to bring them back in some safe way that they could do that, because we're a social function for them, and it's really important that we don't forget them.
Absolutely. And what about when it comes to this question from Whitney Owens? Is anybody doing fee-based online or on-site programming? So I think this is a big conversation, is what's a way that we can generate revenue through online programs? Is anyone doing that?
Simply no, because as I said, everybody is chucking it out free. I mean, I know I shouldn't, well, but my equivalent at the British Museum bumped into his director, and they said, hey, and all of a sudden he's converted to the idea of charging for content, having previously been all for complete free access. It's lovely, but I just think we're taking crown jewels and just throwing them out the door, if I'm perfectly honest. So it's too late now. Everybody's done it. Everybody's out there. At some point when we get back to normality, I think there needs to be a hard conversation between institutions like ours that says, you know, do we really want to carry on doing this?
For sure. Sarah, Claire, anything else you want to throw in there on-site or online programming?
We had talked about, we have a lecture series, and we talked about converting that to a virtual, and I wanted to charge money for it, not much, $5 or something like that. And the staff said, why would anybody pay to come to, or, you know, watch our lectures when everybody else is free? So we haven't really moved forward on that, because that's a very good question. Why would somebody pay to listen to ours when they can listen to others for free?
For sure. Charity, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to offer up that I've heard some museums talking about maybe not their just general programming charging for it, but allowing sort of virtual tours to be booked and paid for. So Cranbrook Institute in the Detroit area is an example of that. I think I've heard of maybe one or two Milwaukee organizations considering like trying to charge for live musical performance that takes place live stream from their courtyard gardens or spaces, but it is a kind of a, you know, different type of program than just what they would normally offer, or it's sort of a program for hire, I guess.
And we've seen this a fair amount. We've covered virtual programming and fee-based online programming in some of the QZM webinars, and I'm going to probably do a disservice trying to remember, but a couple organizations. One of them is called the Mattituck Museum, and they've done like special programming. So they did like a digital online murder mystery, and each person had to pay, you know, I don't know what the entry fee was, and they said it was a huge hit. They had hundreds of folks join. I've heard of other ones doing curator talks or very, very, you know, micro meetups. with folks from the staff that people pay to participate in. Oftentimes that's more geared towards membership. But generally speaking, we have heard of some organizations that are doing that. But again, the ongoing challenge is, are folks willing to pay for it? Are folks going to actually, especially, and as Richard was alluding to, in a time where there is so much free content available and everyone is just kind of has opened the floodgates as far as content and engagement opportunities. It poses some challenges. So here's another question. This one is from Emmeline Coster. Do any of the museums worry that your boards or other governing authorities may opt to mothball your institution until after the pandemic, effectively, put everything on pause? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Having suffered a 3.5-hour board meeting yesterday, no. I think that there's an enormous groundswell of support, but I think there's a view that we're going to have to take some quite tough action to keep the show on the road. So, you only have to look at what's happening in London. So the National Theatre let go 160 people the other day. That I think is people will have to look at their cost base. As I said, it's all about recovery trajectory. It depends how quickly it gets back to normal, but the trustees are very supportive. Our trustees are fantastically supportive, but they're encouraging us to look at all options. Which is quite, it's tough, isn't it?
For sure. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to contribute there?
I agree. Our board has been very supportive. We were able to get one of the payroll protection program loans, so we didn't have to lay anybody off. The board, we had already started looking at increasing our earned income anyway. So the board has been very supportive of us, and right now, knock on wood, I think we're doing pretty well.
For sure. Here's another question. As it relates to capacity, is there a formula that you're using to determine your capacity in galleries?
This one's quite easy for me because one of our spaces can only take 4 people at any one time. So but that has its own challenges because we do want to get everybody in to see it throughout the day. And this Saturday we've got the wedding in the barn and we need to close the barn for 3 hours. So I'm having to work quite closely with my visitor services team to make sure that we're really upfront about the fact that is happening, and that we our staff, again, back to that training aspect, they know exactly what the limit is in and out, and they know how to manage that and queue people appropriately to make sure that we manage those spaces. But we did a risk assessment before we opened for every single space, and all the capacities were determined before we opened, and we've been quite cautious. We've kept to the 2-meter rule, and we've actually erred on the side of caution when it comes to numbers in spaces.
Definitely. Anybody else want to throw anything in there?
So we borrowed, if you like, this capacity calculator from the States, which has been excellent. I mean, really good. It does require a lot of input. So it's a bit like Claire said, you have to go through gallery by gallery and work out your capacity. But it takes those inputs and it actually churns out some really quite useful information. But as I say, it's got variables in terms of what social distancing you work to. So at the moment in galleries, we're working to 2 meters. We might move to 1 meter plus with face masks. You never, it keeps changing all the time. It does allow for pinch points, but the key is how long does what's the dwell time? How long do people stay in your museum? Because what you don't want to do is front load it where loads of people come in and then they're all spending 2 hours when you thought they were going to spend 70 minutes. So that's one element of it, which I think is quite sensitive. Can I just pick up very briefly about this selling content online thing? Because I saw quite a few comments coming in saying, actually, we're doing okay in selling content. And I agree with you. I think there's a mindset in London in particular that says actually you can't charge for this stuff. I think you can. I think particularly if you're topical. And what I found frustrating is when Black Lives Matter broke in London, and we've got a ton of content relating to it, whether it's in either museum, and we've got a whole gallery over in Docklands called London, Sugar and Slavery, and we took all that content and we chucked it out for free. And it was just frustration. I think there's a mindset that says this is the public's and therefore they must have free access to it.
Definitely. I think a question that I'm wondering is for organizations that haven't reopened or just reopened, what are some of these additional or, unexpected costs that you've encountered as part of that you're, trying to recoup now through revenue? Is it PPE or, adjustments to your physical space, ticketing, new software? Can you all talk a little bit about that?
We had a very generous donor, a board member actually, who paid for our masks and gloves and sanitizer and all of that. So we didn't have to take that out of our budget, but we have had to, the online, there's a fee for the online ticketing service. There were fees for the online auction. So there were some administrative costs that we are trying to recoup. One of the things that we did to cover the administrative costs for the online ticketing was that we actually raised our admission price. It's not a lot compared to everybody else in the state, so it's not hurting us financially.
Sure. Claire, anything you want to throw in there?
No, the biggest costs for us was the PPE for staff, the new signage, because we wanted professional signage done where possible, A-frames for where we weren't quite sure whether we'd need a sign or not, so we just bought a load. The airport barriers, because we never had to use them before, and the cleaning costs. So we now have an on-site cleaner just whenever we're open, just going around and doing door handles and toilets, just on a continual loop to keep on top of that. But we've set aside a budget for COVID-related costs.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Same here. I mean, we've probably spent $75,000, what's that, $100,000 roughly on 83 sanitizer units, 8 perspex screens, PPE. It goes on, and we've done the same as you. We've isolated a budget for it because I think at some point we will need to do a wash up and say what did it cost the industry.
For sure. And by the way, I'm just going to say, Diane posted a couple of the online events that they're hosting, Who Killed Wild West, and then a little online date night. Super fun. I love it. Probably going to attend, not even joking. So I think for a last question here is, which audiences are you, or second to last question, which audiences are you really focused on and relying on for participation here, as far as visitation or admission? Who are you most worried about not seeing or losing? Richard, can you start?
Yeah, I mean, we're focusing on what we would call adult self-developers. The average age of the visitor last week to the National Gallery was 51. And that would be about the sweet spot from our point of view. So these are mature adults who are interested in learning about stuff and have probably been bored to tears for the last 3 months being cooped up. So they're the ones we're going for. The ones that I'm terrified about, 40% of our visitors are families. And when I add in the public transport factor and young children, is not a great combination, and they're a big chunk of our audience, and I'm worried that they're going to take a long time to feel comfortable coming to see us.
For sure. Sarah, how about on your side?
Sorry. Our visitation tends to be older, and it's about 50% in-state, 50% out-of-state. We've been open since July 6th, and I am stunned that almost everybody we've had has been from out of state. We've had Texas, Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Virginia. So I think people are staying, well, people in the United States can't really travel very far outside of the country. So I think they are going to stay close, but I was really surprised. I thought it would be more Kentuckians that would be coming instead of out-of-staters, but families, definitely. We've had to cancel all of the school groups. So I think we're mainly going to see adults, and that's where our older adults, and that's where we're going to put our marketing.
Definitely. Awesome. So I think I've got just one last big question for all of our panelists. And if you were going to give some words of wisdom or some thoughts or some learnings that you've taken away from all of this, what would those be for our attendees? Claire, can you start us off?
Oh, on the spot first. I know I keep on going back to it, but training of my front of house teams and making everybody feel really comfortable with all the changes that we've made, and that messaging for me was really, really vital. I felt that if the staff had confidence in what we were about to deliver, then that would in turn go through to the visitor. And so far the feedback that we've had has been that they have really felt happy with their visit and secure whilst they've been with us. And interestingly, just getting back to the last point, our visitor numbers are actually up 40% on last year, because you generally drive to the Henry Moore Foundation. There's no public transport, so we're at the other end of the spectrum. So in terms of people thinking, their perception of a safe day out, we're kind of ticking a lot of boxes. So it's so far it's going well, but obviously it comes back to that sense of safety for everybody.
Absolutely, and I definitely think you're in a really advantageous position, given that everyone drives there and they don't have to utilize the public transportation. Sarah, how about on your side? Any words of wisdom?
I think that, excuse me, I think Claire was right. We really brought in, when we developed our reopening plan, everybody on staff. We have a very small staff, but I included the frontline staff. I included some board members so that everybody bought into what we were planning to do, and also to get new perspectives. I might think I know everything, but it's really good to get other people's opinions. And I would say, don't be afraid to try something new. Maybe not the ghost, but something new and creative, like the nighttime, the virtual dating thing. That's pretty cool. So yeah, just try to be calm. We were panic stricken in the beginning. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? But I think just be calm and think about things, be logical. I think that everything will work out.
It's definitely a time for experimentation, for sure. And Richard, take us home.
I'm glad I didn't go first. That's all I can say, Claire. Actually, I think we were pretty proactive. I think there would be two big takeaways from me, one of which we've covered already. But the first one was, don't give your content away. Just package it up and try and monetize it. That was crazy. And if I had my time again, I'd be much tougher on the content team to say, please just don't spray it out. That'd be just dreadful. The other one is that our marketing is fundamentally being, posters and paper. We do an awful lot on London transport. Millions and millions of people travel on the tube every day, and we keep ourselves front of mind by putting our image on tube trains. That's fundamentally how we go. So I think we were caught a bit unawares when all of a sudden transport's empty and you have to switch over to digital. And I'm not sure we were that well prepared for it. We didn't have the content, we didn't have the channels, and it's taken us a while to get ourselves back up and running on that one. So those are the two. They're both digital, but they're two big takeaways for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of our panelists. And Charity, anybody else want to have any last closing words?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks again to our panelists and to everybody who participated today. Lots of great information and links in the chat. So if you didn't already save it out, you don't have to worry. We will share that along with, the recording from today and any resources our panelists decide to share. In addition to the last couple reopening plans and action series sessions, we'll share all of those resources with everyone who signed up for today's event. So thanks for being here, and watch for that email from us, and hopefully it's helpful going forward.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank